Welcome to our evening worship service and to our presentation of Experience Alaska. Back in May, 14 of our students had the opportunity to travel to Alaska as part of a program called Experience Alaska. And on this trip, our students were able to grow through their opportunities to be part of worshiping communities in both Anchorage and Palmer. They had the opportunity to meet incredible people and fell in love with the hospitality of the Alaskan communities that we were a part of. We joke about Southern hospitality being the best kind of hospitality, but I'm sure that everyone in this group would say that Alaskan hospitality is just as good, if not better, than Southern hospitality. We want to thank the congregations of First Presbyterian Church in Anchorage, whose pastor, Matt Schultz, is a Westminster alum, and the pastors and community of Palmer, where we were part of the Community Presbyterian Church in Palmer, and their pastors and congregation. Both congregations welcomed us with open arms and allowed us to be a part of all that they were doing during the time that we were there. And so we're grateful for opportunities to lead worship, to live in your churches, to be able to explore the communities around you and receive the friendly welcome that we received from both congregations. This evening, you're going to have the opportunity to hear from our students and their reflections on the trip. They're going to talk about people. They're going to talk about places that we went and the things that we did. All of them are a gift from God, so we give thanks. Again, welcome to our worship service. It's a good time for you all to be thinking about whether or not you'd like to try to do something like this. We'll be doing it again next May. In between, we have a lot of activities and trips and things like that are being scheduled, and you're invited to participate in any of them. After the service today, we're going to actually have a meeting to talk a little bit about that. And so we invite you to stick around if you have any interest. Friends, when we gather for worship, we remember and reflect on the week that has passed and think about the things that are coming up. Can't help but think about some friends in this community that have lost loved ones. There's a young lady, a senior in high school at Neshannock High School, who passed away from a genetic disorder that is in her family, her mom's family, that's been passed down. A total surprise to the family. 19-year-old senior, or 18-year-old senior, I think. Katie Parrish is her name. And we've had a former Westminster faculty member pass away, Ron Berge, who was an accounting business major professor, a wonderful friend of the community. He lived here for a long, long time, and so we remember him. We think about families that are going through the stress of the hurricanes, plural, that have already hit Houston and right now are moving up through Miami and the west coast of Florida, headed toward Naples and Tampa Bay and places like that. And I know that affects some of you. You have family there. I know we have a student from St. Pete, and so we have several students from the Miami area, and everyone's going through this together, so we remember in our prayers all of those friends and family members and people that you don't know at all, and first responders who are doing their best or will be doing their best to help people move through that. We have a family member in Fort Lauderdale who sent a text or an email out earlier that said the water was 10 inches below the break wall. An hour later, she sent another one that said the water's now 10 inches above the break wall. And at their house, the break wall is on ground level, and then you go across a small yard, and it's one step up into their house. So my guess is that at this point in the day, they probably have water in their house. And so we pray for families like that, and we know for some it's going to get worse as it goes. We also know that there are family members that some of you have that are struggling with illness and stress at home with jobs and things like that. And so we remember and keep in our prayers folks like that, friends and family members that, life is not going well right now. And so if you'll join me in prayer for them. Let me offer a prayer to get us started, and then we'll greet one another And then I invite you to move forward so that you can listen to the folks who are going to be speaking. And it's okay to respond to the pictures you'll see behind us. And they've been challenged not to turn around and look because they actually can see the pictures, so they don't need to do that. But they're going to share their journey with you. So let me pray. Lord God, we pause in the midst of what has been a beautiful weekend. We give thanks to you for time to rest and to have fun, perhaps on the boat on Friday night, or playing games yesterday, or just allowing ourselves to relax in our dorm rooms, or taking a walk on campus. This evening, we pray for family and friends who are in the midst of crisis as hurricanes move throughout and lives begin to get put back together, and then there's others who are worried and wondering what's going to happen in the next 24 hours. Lord, we pray that you would hold each and every one in your hands and keep them safe and allow them to find a sense of peace that comes after the storm. We pray for families that are struggling with the loss of loved ones and friends of this community who have lost children and older adults. And we pray that you would help us to rejoice in the gift of the resurrection, even though we don't understand a whole lot of what happens in life. So Lord, be with us now as we worship you. Allow our minds to be open to possibilities that you have in store for each of us. In your Son's name we pray. Amen. So I'd like to offer the peace of Christ to each of you. May the peace of the Lord Jesus Christ be with you all. And the response is, and also with you. Take a moment and just greet one another, and we'll get started.
Have you seen that video of Jennifer Lawrence? She stands up in front of a crowd and she was saying, she's like, I usually don't do these things. She's very
Mountains, where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, who's the maker of heaven and earth. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
peace abounds in deepest waters. Your sovereign hand will be my guide. Your feet may fail, fear surrounds me. You never fail, and you won't start now. And I will call upon your name and keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace. I am yours, you are mine. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. And take me deeper than my feet could ever wander. My faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. And I will call upon your name and keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace. I am yours, and you are mine. Thank you.
Evening, everyone. Thank you. Hey, my name is Patrick. I'm an environmental science professor at Westminster College. I'm a lucky guy to have joined our students and Reverend Warren on this trip. While we were up there, Jim was very much aware that when we had opportunities to come back and tell our family and friends about this opportunity, it would be very difficult for us to try to capture the feeling, the emotion, let alone the mountains and just the majestic beauty of Alaska. And I think he was right. I've constantly talked about this with my friends, and then they stopped showing up, and I still talk about it with myself, I guess. But it's a wonderful trip, and so we're going to take a stab at this tonight. But first, thank you for coming out. This is the first time our group has been back together as Sans Neil since we came back, and so it's so nice to see everybody again. While we were traveling, we had an opportunity. We stayed in churches and got to participate in services. I consistently took on the role of paparazzi for the group during the service. I took pictures, and one of the reasons I took pictures is that I have never, this is the first time I've ever spoken in front of a church. And much of the trip was about, I'm afraid to look behind me, was about overcoming your fears and about confronting some of the things that maybe get you out of your comfort zone a little bit. So tonight, I'm going to try that for the first time. I don't have much time. I want to share with you a few of my observations, in part as an ecologist, but also as a child of God. Took a few notes like a good professor should. Number one, glaciers are big. Really, really big. You have no idea. On our trip out there, normally if you've flown before, you look down, your cruising altitude's about 35,000 feet. You look down, roads disappear, cars disappear. Cities, Pittsburgh, you're over Pittsburgh in 2 minutes. When we were on our flight out to Alaska, I looked down and thought I saw a glacier, and then I was nudging everyone around me going, hey, I think that's a glacier, that's a glacier. And it was really cool. And it was really cool for 10 minutes over that same glacier. Hundreds of square miles. The enormity of it. The glaciers go through valleys and they swallow entire mountains. They carve out things. And it's unbelievable how big and active. I think the smallest glacier we were on was 75 square miles. Just they change the entire landscape. Number one, glaciers are big. Number two, I've taught biology or ecology of some sort for 20 years. I've taught about biomes. So one of the more memorable things, I took a nap on a tundra. We had a group that, and laying there on a tundra, getting tired, and it was a sunny day in Denali. What kept waking me up were ptarmigan. Birds that are snow white that molt and they blend, they kept calling. And what a neat experience to smell the earth, to smell the soil, to be a part of that, knowing that just around the corner was a herd of caribou. And there were mountain sheep grazing above us. Really peaceful. And everything, I celebrated an anniversary when I was out there. I had 11 years ago, I had a kidney transplant. And I always try to mark days in my life to remind me how important life is and the gift that's been given to me. When you're in an area like that, you have a lot to be thankful for. You're reminded of that. On May 30th, I woke up to Neil running through our camp, screaming, hey everybody, it's May 30th, 2017, and it's snowing in Denali. That's my experience of this year on my anniversary. On the third day out there, I had lost a very dear friend. After a very painful struggle with cancer, I didn't tell anybody. I don't think I told any guys this. It caused me to stop and reflect upon things that were very important to me. We need strong Christian men and women. And if there were a few more like John Raymond Tote in our lives, we would be doing really well. It's quite the contrast for me on our trip. A little bit later, you're going to hear about a hike up to Flat Top Mountain. Jim and I did not make the trip because we stayed behind to protect the car. If you believe that. While we were there, we were bundled. It was probably a 30-mile-an-hour wind in the valley. It was probably worse up top. But we were bundled from head to toe. And it was all about layers and heavy clothing, and the only thing that was exposed was our eyes, because we came upon a family of people who are Native Americans, Native Alaskans, or Alaskan natives, I should say. And we came up to them. Jim and I were shivering, could barely talk, and they were wearing flip-flop shorts and T-shirts and complaining about the heat wave. A couple more quick reflections. In Talkeetna, Alaska, I met the mayor. I went to Nagley General Store. Mayor Stubbs was the mayor of Talkeetna, Alaska, a small town, and serves as one of the jumping-off points to climb Denali. Mayor Stubbs recently passed away after serving 20 years in office. He was a cat. But one of the neat things, when I was leaving that general store, everybody was waiting on me, which never happens. And across the park, in the one road through town, I could look up in the parking lot, and as I was coming down the steps, I could see our group. And we were on the backside of our trip at that point, and you could really tell how much of a family we had become. It was really great to see everybody out there, even greater to make them wait for me. And one more sort of reflection I wanted to share was that as soon as I got home, I contacted one of my really good friends, someone who's been a mentor and a role model for me, and I asked him if we can get together and pray. So we did, and a couple days later he showed up with a book, and I had Born Again. It was the book that he shared. And I guess I want to say that we've been back now for 2 months, and our journey, I think, has, well, mine's just starting. And I really can't express how appreciative I am of the group. Westminster is a really great place. Our trip was supported by funding and gifts, and everyone who's a student in this room is here because somebody gave, and how important that is, and what a wonderful place to be. So, thank you.
Hey guys. So what I'm going to talk about is the day we had the picnic at the Lindenhuis house. So let me just set the scene for you a little bit. So this is about 5 days into the journey. We started out in Anchorage, and then we went to Seward, and then we went back to Anchorage. But the day before we were in Seward, we took a whale watching boat tour. It lasted about, 6 hours? Yeah, I was out for 6 hours. So I had a little bit of a rough day, but it was all right. So we got back in Anchorage that Sunday morning. We led the church service there. So we were all, I don't know about the rest of you guys, but I was pretty tired. That boat took it out of me, and 5 days of constantly moving took it out of me as well. So after the church service, we met this family, the Lindenhuis. Talked to them for maybe 10 to 15 minutes after the service. Got to know them a little bit, and then they invited us to their house for a picnic. 15 to 16 strangers going to a family's house for a picnic. All right? But later that day, we went to the market in Anchorage just to kill some time. And one of the most interesting people we met at the market was the man who hated Texas. I can't remember his name, but in the journal he is the man who hated Texas. So he didn't really hate Texas, he just would make funny jokes about Texas. So if I remember correctly, half of Alaska is still bigger than Texas. So that was the running joke he had. He had a shirt that was an Alaskan large that could fit a grizzly bear, and then he had a Texas large that could fit a teacup terrier. So he would have little gags like that. It was pretty funny. But we talked to him for probably 15 or 20 minutes. He was a real interesting and cool guy. But then he wanted to find me a Texas sticker. He couldn't find it, so we left. About 30 minutes later, you see this man. He is a big, burly man, okay? He's booking it down the aisle in this market, and he finds me. He tells me to give him a thumbs up, so I give him a thumbs up. He tells me to stick out my pointer finger, so I stick out my pointer finger. And then he says, raise my elbow. So I raise my elbow. So now this looks like Alaska. And then he grabbed that Texas sticker and slapped it on my hand. He said, now you always know how small Texas is. So I kept that Texas sticker. So anytime I look at that, I think of him. So he's a complete stranger who instantly became my friend after he chased me down and slapped a sticker on my hand. So it was starting to be a good day, way better than the boat. So then after that, we got back, and then we immediately went to this picnic. Now, like I said before, we only met this family for about 10 to 15 minutes before. So we really don't know them, and they really don't know us that well. Now, while we were in Alaska, we did a bunch of incredible things. We hiked mountains, we kayaked, we all got to go in a tiny plane. A lot of people got sick on the plane too. We did the whale watching tour. We did a bunch of great things. And this picnic was one of the simplest things we did, but it was the thing that left one of the biggest imprints in my memory. So this family took all of us, the ragtag group we are, in their house, and we made it our home. Within 5 minutes, we were friends. We were all outside playing volleyball, talking around the campfire, had fantastic food. And now let me describe this family real quick. So think of Cheaper by the Dozen and the Brady Bunch, and combine them. So these kids were athletic, smart, and insanely musically talented. Paul, I think his name was Paul, he pulled out his cello and played pop songs on a cello. And then Katie, if I remember correctly, played one of her songs. He's like, oh, that sounds good, and then played it on the cello. So they were insane, and they'd all sit around, sing, and had a great time. And there's pictures that were going around of all of us in their little living room. There was probably 30 of us stuffed into that tiny room, and it was hot, it was cramped, but I loved every second of it. So I guess the main point I'm trying to get at is we all traveled, obviously, from Pennsylvania almost 4,000 miles away to Alaska, and I made a friend. I made a bunch of friends. We all made a bunch of friends. We all kind of have these random experiences where we run into people that we don't exactly think will impact our lives or that will impact theirs. But after I got there, ate a few hot dogs, and listened to a few of them sing, we instantly became friends, and they impacted my life. And on one of our last days, Mrs. Lindenhuth and her youngest son came to visit us before we left, and you could genuinely see in their eyes that they were sad for us to go. Now, like I said, they impacted our lives, but seeing them have a genuine care and concern for all of us meant we impacted theirs, and there's nothing better than that. So, thank you guys.
The Old Testament reading from Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and hope. Another reading is, when we dedicate our talent to serving our neighbor, it's possibly one of the highest forms of worship. Something sacred transpires when we sacrifice our time and dedicate our God-given loves and talents to one another. Matt Litton. So I'm going to talk about my Habitat Restore experience. So a little backstory is I've been involved in Habitat all 4 years here. I was actually the president last year, and I went on the spring break trips. And then Jim said that we had the opportunity to travel to the Habitat Restore and serve for the day. And I was like, heck yes, that's where I'm going. So it was cool to see in Alaska what they had to offer for the Restore. And if you don't know what a Restore is, Habitat gets donations or buys like clearance things for your house, like sinks and tiles or whatever you can possibly think of. Anything that can be donated, they take them and then they'll resell them for cheaper. And then that way they can make some money to help build the houses in the area. So you'll see some pictures of us at the Restore. Some people are outside breaking sinks and stuff, but I chose to work inside and work with the tiles. They were inside tiles, outside tiles. I know it doesn't seem like a very important thing, but their store had so many things to offer, but they just needed a lot of organization to help, because when you walk into a Restore, someone will spend maybe 5 minutes looking at something, but if they have to dig for more than that long, they won't. They'll just continue on and look for something else. So it's really crucial that they have things displayed properly so that they can get the most out of everything that they have. And so I was working on the tiles, and this lady was looking for a particular tile, and I had saw some where I knew they were, so I helped her get them. And she was telling me about how like her living in Alaska was and how she loved living there. And so we get to talking, and then she was leaving, and she was physically disabled, so I ended up carrying her stuff to the cash register. And it's just like one piece of the trip that kind of reminded me that it's the small things that are important in life. Thanks.
All right, so I wrote mine down because I get super nervous. I'm going to take a chapter out of Dr. Krantz's book and tell you guys a story. If you don't know Dr. Krantz, he loves to tell stories. So my story's a little more serious than everybody else's has been so far. It was about a day that kind of really affected our group in both positive and negative ways. It affected me in a really positive way, so I wanted to share it with you guys. I'm super excited, but again, nervous. So, hi everyone, my name is Sarah Kahn and I'm a junior biology major. Today I want to tell you a story. It sums up what I learned on the Experiencing Alaska trip. God loves, God sees, God provides, God protects. Okay, the door locks secured and the laughter stopped. The van fell silent and an air of severity fell over the students. We had entered an area of Alaska where sidewalks were no longer sat ideally, but were the living homes of their Alaskan residents. Homeless, in America, lined the streets. As the van drew closer to the shelter, the silence became deafening. Our brains told us to run from the unsure and fearful situation, and our hearts broke for the people who had only those around them and nothing more. Men, women, children, homeless. We entered the shelter with caution. We were surrounded on all sides by only a fraction of the homeless found in Anchorage, Alaska. There were hundreds of homeless eyes just staring. Whether it was envy, curiosity, gratefulness, or hatred, their faces stayed unchanged, watching the new intruders. When a volunteer worker was found, we were unexpected. Something had been lost in communication. We were nervous, and that grew into fear. When she returned, it felt like an eternity. She had found odds and ends jobs for us to do and then split the group. Megan and I asked to work in the closet sorting donated, that sorted the donated clothing. Both of us loved the idea of adventure and were less fearful than others had been in the uncomfortable situation. Since we felt more comfortable, we were okay with going in a smaller group, and we happily followed the lady along. We were immediately followed by Dr. Krantz, who felt that we should probably have an adult with us. Though we felt safe in the closet, it was definitely comforting to have a fatherly figure like Dr. Krantz with us. Now this is where the story changes. We met a man whose name was Alvin. He organized and kept the donation closet running smoothly. Alvin was an older gentleman with a hunch, a limp, and a long beard. He was friendly and kind, but he was quiet. Side note, if you don't know them, Megan and Dr. Krantz have this uncanny ability to get a conversation literally out of anyone. I mean anyone. It's an ability that I admire and hope to acquire someday. They began to ask him questions. We soon realized that he was homeless himself. What the shelter did for the homeless was they'd house, feed, and equip their temporary residents until they were able to find a job and a home that they could call their own. Alvin worked hours in the closet to pay for what they were helping him accomplish, which was a new life. The next question would come to give a very sad answer. Dr. Krantz asked, "How did you get here?" Alvin told us his story. "I had a life, I met a woman, and things went bad. I turned to alcohol and drugs, the woman left me, and I threw myself in front of a bus. I woke up 2 weeks later in the hospital." Alvin had tried to end it all. He went on to tell us that the doctors had sewed his right arm back on, and that they took 2 inches off his left leg. He stood up straight, and his foot no longer touched the floor. He placed it back down, and then he limped back over to another bag of donated clothes and started folding them. Megan, being the beautiful person that she is, sympathized and asked, "What got you through it all?" Alvin responded, "I just woke up with a new positive attitude. I knew somebody was up there and was looking out for me. I don't know what his plans are for me yet, but I'm wholeheartedly looking. I can't always make it to church, but I'm always talking to him." Alvin was 6 months clean and sober. He was starting his life over. It was a privilege and an honor to serve with a man like Alvin. His story is the story of so many homeless in Anchorage, Alaska. I would not have changed this experience for the world. It showed me God's unfailing love through how he saw Alvin. Alvin was stuck and felt his life no longer had meaning. God saw him as worthy of his love and attention. It reminds me of Matthew 10:29 through 31, which says, "Are not 2 sparrows sold for a cent, and yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father. But the very hairs of your head are all numbered. So do not fear, you are more valuable than many sparrows." God provided the team with protection at the shelter even though we felt fearful and uncomfortable. He also provided protection and aid when Alvin was at his lowest of points. This story and this experience showed me just how true it is that God never leaves his children and he never forsakes them, because we are all worth so much more than sparrows. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about our trip to the recycling center. Filthy, disturbed, and underappreciated. I use these 3 words to describe part of our experience, but I'm not talking about Dr. Krantz. Throughout the trip, one thing was brought to our attention a lot, and it was climate change. And that's something I think a lot of us know about and acknowledge, but we don't really do anything about it. I just remember walking to the recycling center, and right across from it was the dump. So we walk in, and the lady's really welcoming. You walk in the office, and they have all these different things made of recycled trash or even just like plastic bags. And the first thing I remember is this really odd video she showed us of this veterinarian sticking these little things inside of animals because plastic bags were getting strewn all across the trees, so that animals were actually feeding on them and eating the bags, but they can't digest them. So she's just pulling like a bunch of bags out of this moose, and it's just really weird. So then she takes us back behind the recycling center into this woodsy area, and you can see where this hill's kind of like purposely built to kind of block off where the dump is. And you look over to your side and you see all these trees, but there's trash everywhere. There's bags strewn in the trees, there's cardboard covering the ground, like where you're stepping there's barely any grass. And it's kind of sad because you look and trash goes as far as you can see and probably further. So I didn't even realize like what little I actually knew about what was going on. I even remember Kristen and I being like, oh, well, we reuse our grocery bags for trash bags, but it actually didn't do anything. It just kind of made the problem worse because we were still using them. So like little things like buying reusable grocery bags, buying reusable water bottles, like picking up trash we see could really make a difference. And I think that's something we all need to realize. Little things can make a difference, and little actions that we do can make an impact. So if you're interested in this kind of thing, I would really talk to Dr. Krantz because he has a lot of good insight on this, and he always needs help at the field station. So thank you.
Okay, so before I share my experience, I am going to give you a reading from Genesis 50, chapter 21. So do not fear, I will provide for you and your little ones. Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. Okay, so first off, I would just like to say what a blessing this whole trip was. I had never traveled anywhere further west than Chicago before this, so just getting to go to Alaska didn't seem like it was real to me at first. But one of the experiences that really stuck with me was our trip to Exit Glacier, and this is actually in Kenai Fjords National Park, which was the first national park I had ever been to. And I didn't really know what to expect. I mean, I've never really seen a glacier other than in the movie Ice Age or in Titanic or whatever. But driving up to the park, it was really neat because the whole way to the national park, there were different markings on the side of the road. And these markings were years that showed just how far the glacier used to come out. So we drove past like 1850, 1900, 1910, and as we got closer and closer to the national park, it just showed how far or how much this glacier actually melted throughout all these years past and how big it used to be. So that was really cool to put it in that perspective for me. But when we arrived at the glacier, we were greeted by this little man, and by little I mean he was probably like 5 foot tall. He was our tour guide, his name was Luke. And he was a ranger at Kenai Fjords National Park, and he was the one who was going to give us our hike up to the glacier and just educate us about it. And I really didn't know what to expect, but as we began to hike up to the mountains up to go see the glacier, we saw more of those little signs showing the years that had passed where the glacier had melted and shrunk throughout all those years. And as we walked up there, Luke just continued to educate us about this glacier. And one thing really cool about Luke is just how passionate he was about teaching us this stuff, because this was something that I probably wouldn't have been interested in before the trip, but as he began to just talk to us more and more, you could just tell what a passion this guy had for just teaching about Alaska and about how the glacier has impacted the environment and the ecosystems and all that. So once we got up to where the glacier was, we finally saw what was left of it after all these years of the glacier melting. And it was a lot smaller than I expected it to be. It was still very large, as Dr. Krantz said. Like, glaciers are very enormous, but it was very small in comparison to how large it had been before it had melted through all those years. So it was one really cool thing about Luke when he talked about the glacier. He wasn't one of those people who kind of just shoved global warming down our throat and said, like, look, like, global warming is a thing, the icebergs are melting. He kind of let us form our own opinions on it. The way he educated us, he told us that there were many benefits to the glacier melting as well as harmful effects to the environment. For example, as the glacier melted, it was able to deposit like minerals into the ground, and it helped create new ecosystems and whatnot. But it was still evident that this glacier was melting at a very fast rate and that we might have something to do with it. So it was cool that he let us form our own opinion about what we wanted to think about this global warming issue. And I just think it's really cool that we were able to stand there. I think this was like an awe moment for me when we were standing next to the glacier, and Luke basically told us to look out at this valley. Just imagine like a valley with high mountains and like, I forget what kind of trees they were, some kind of evergreen trees out there. And Luke said, imagine however many years ago that this glacier, it wasn't little, but this smaller glacier that we were looking at used to fill this entire valley. And I just remember looking around and just seeing like this empty valley and thinking what it would have looked like with that glacier in there. And I was just like amazed that this is one of God's creations and something that we are having an impact on. And ultimately it just gave me a new perspective on this issue. And the way Luke was able to teach us about it just shows like how passionate people in Alaska are about these things and how much they want to just educate all of us who aren't really educated about it to begin with, and just show us that this is something that we should care about. So I guess one of my biggest takeaways from this trip was just a new perspective on all of this. I would have never been able to think about the environment in the ways I was able to, and just witness God's creation in the way I did. And I'm just so thankful that I was able to see it all. So thank you.
So my name is Jesse, and I'm going to talk to you about this place we went to called the Sea Life Center. So basically the Sea Life Center it's a public aquarium, as well it's a research center and education center, and they also do wildlife rescue. And so this is in Seward. And so at first you go and it's another aquarium, but featuring mostly Alaskan wildlife. So they had seals, sea lions, then they had some sharks, some fish. They had a cool jellyfish exhibit. They had a very big puffin enclosure. You could go in and you were like right there, and the puffins could have flied right at your head if they'd wanted to. They didn't, fortunately, but they could have. One of my favorite things was they had a baby sea otter that had been abandoned that they'd rescued, and you could look down and you could actually see its trainers and caretakers going in with it and feeding it by hand, which was, baby sea otters are adorable. It was really adorable. And we also got to see an octopus being fed, which I don't know if you've ever seen an octopus being fed, but they give it it was like a clam shell or an oyster shell, and they give it the whole thing, and it engulfs this shell with all its tentacles, and then it eats the insides, and it drops the shell, and it cracks the shell with its beak, and it was just really cool. And so you might be wondering why we're in Alaska, we saw these awesome things outside, and why are we going to an aquarium to see, stuff that you could see in a lot of aquariums back in, the Pittsburgh Aquarium or something like that. But one of the points of the trip was vocational discernment. And so that's why this place stood out to me, because that's what I want to do, is work in aquariums, or I actually spent the summer working in a zoo. So that's why the Sea Life Center stood out so much to me.
Hello everybody, my name is Josh. For this talk they asked for us to talk about something that impacted us the most, and everybody talked about multiple things, and there's many more that I'm sure that we won't hit on, but probably could be talked about as well. But as I thought about it, without what I should choose, I kind of chose the opposite of what Austin said about how the boat trip went not great for him, but it's probably my greatest experience of the whole thing. But before that, I want to rewind back to our trip to Seward, which is where we took the boat out of. We're driving into Seward. I quickly found out that it's the world's most northern rainforest because it rained pretty much every day, all day, for 24 hours. But as we're driving there, you're just like, there's just mountains everywhere. There's like this crystal blue lake you're driving right next to. It was the most gorgeous drive I've ever been on in my entire life. It was like a 2-hour drive that felt like it was 45 minutes. It was just so much to look at. But as we get into Seward, it's still raining and raining and raining, and then we get stop at our bed and breakfast we stayed at, and then we got some sleep because it was a long day of traveling. And then the next morning we go to the Seamen's Mission, which these people I thought were incredible. Seward is like a resort town. It's like your traditional coastal town like you would think of when you think Alaska. And cruise ships come in, and they have crew members from all over the world. And anyway, the Seamen's Mission, they take these crew members in from these boats, and they feed them, they teach them about God, they bring them in and help them as much as they can. But it was our job, as we were half our group, well, more than half our group, they were baked like 100 pounds of cookie dough, like a lot of cookie dough. And like a few of us, we went and did some landscaping, just simple jobs around the church. And they just continued to talk to the pastor there, and it was just another, one of those amazing people that we met while we were there, that inspired all of us. So that was a great experience. And then moving on from that, we go back and rest up for the next day and our 6-hour boat ride, and everybody's all excited about it. And then we get on the boat about 15 minutes in, probably 4 people are green and sick, so it's like, okay, here we go. But I actually felt okay, but as we get out there, it's still raining, shocker. We get on the boat, and immediately, half an hour into the boat ride, we see a whole pod of killer whales, and they're right up along the side of the boat. And we saw that, and then we saw seals, we saw gray whales, humpback whales, all these different sea life that the people on the boat said that they rarely ever see. So it was really a great opportunity to see that. And we just took many great pictures. You'll see, unfortunately not on the screen right now, but there's so many on there. But then the part of that boat ride hit me the most was not the wildlife and all the things that we saw during the boat ride. Is after about 4 hours into the 6-hour boat ride, we're on our way back in, and the skies open up, and it's just everything's just beautiful. Skies are all blue. You can see all the mountains around, and I was just sitting there at this point Austin's feeling better, so he's back at it and able to see everything. But it was just, it was breathtaking. It was just, and there's really no words I can put to it. So that's the part of the trip that I would say impacts me the most, is just seeing the beauty of what God has made and that. So if anybody's here interested in going on the trip, I highly suggest it. And it's a trip of a lifetime. I would do it again a million times if I could. So thank you.
I know we stand silent in the trees, and that's where I am, silent in the trees. Why won't you speak where I happen to be, silent in the trees, standing cowardly? I can feel your breath. I can feel my death. I want to know you. I can feel your breath. I can feel my death. I want to know you. I want to see. I want to say I can feel your breath. I can feel my death. I want to know you. I want to see. I want to say hello.
Hi, I'm Kristen, as some of you probably know, and I will be talking about something that was very impactful for me and probably some other people on the trip that happened towards the end. It was when we were in Denali National Park. We were going camping there, and we were really roughing it out there. Like it was pretty cold, and we had to sleep in these like half tent, half cabins, like no heating or anything, and no showers, just pit toilets. So it was very, out of everybody's comfort zone, and we were out in the middle of literally nowhere, just trees and mountains everywhere, and there was like no signal whatsoever on our phones. Like I tried a couple times, even like way out in the open by the mountains, just to see, and there was nothing. But at that time, we had been to a lot of different churches and did a lot of really cool devotions and service work, and doing all that stuff was really amazing. But I surprisingly had this impactful God wink, like way far away from any churches or like Habitat for Humanity or any of the places you would really expect it, because it was out middle of nowhere and among trees, like in the song. And at this point, I was feeling like really homesick. I wasn't looking forward to sleeping in the cold and potentially waking up with a bear like sniffing my sleeping bag or or anything like that, and not showering, and there were some tears and moodiness that was hard for me to hide, and in short, I just really wanted to be on the next flight out of there. I had an awesome time, but I was ready to I was just really missing home and my family, but after some fitful sleep, a lot of waking up, freezing, and trying to, cuddle up in my sleeping bag, get warm. I felt a little better waking up, but I still missed home a lot and was worried about the cold nights that we were in for like a couple more days there. But I was in the right place at the right time that morning. I happened to walk by when one of our members, Josh, I heard him mentioning that he got a text from God, like they were joking around about something like that, and I was like, well, what does he mean by that? And so I asked him, and I wasn't disappointed when he told me he somehow had gotten his daily Bible verse app out in this like internet Wi-Fi dead zone, but somehow it still got to his phone, and the text was something like, we were unable to save it, unfortunately, because we were nowhere, and he couldn't save it on his phone because of the lack of internet, but it said something about not to worry because we are in God's hands and that'll take care of us. And It was really short and sweet, but it was definitely what I needed at the time. I immediately felt like so much better, and it excited me, it gave me confidence that things were going to be okay, and I just felt God's presence a lot, and I was ready to go. Bears and sleeping in cold tents or not, and it just showed us that God can still find us even in a internet dead zone where the Wi-Fi can't find you, and also this revelation just kept repeating itself like all day that day as we were out hiking and seeing all the amazing mountains, and just it felt like you were at the edge of the world, just like all these pine trees and mountains behind them, like and it just reminded me that I remember thinking about Matthew 6:25 through 26, the verse that says, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they?" And that was the verse, and I reflected on that, I'm more valuable. This verse says I'm more valuable, and I also realized that even though it looked like end of the earth and nothing could get more amazing than this, this view, these views, I realized it was only a minuscule part of God's whole creation. It was just a teeny tiny part of the entire world, the entire universe. But it still inspired me and inspired us, and it's continued to inspire millions of people and leave them awestruck, even though it's just a little speck in God's creation, which is pretty impressive to say the least. And I recall just thinking, also, along with the verse, also that if God can make all of this and more, all this amazing and really cool stuff, then He can definitely look after me easily and and just keep us protected and help us feel to His warm presence like I had that morning. And I had always known that God was there for me. And that He would provide, grew up in a Christian family and was always told that, always kind of lukewarmly believed it. But after hearing the miraculous text and the witnessing of the sights of just that day alone, I rarely have ever felt inspired or the presence of God in any other part of my life. And it was it's something I'll never forget. And if any of you are interested in coming on this trip, I definitely encourage you guys to go, and I'm sure you'll find your own God winks as well. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Katie, for those of you who don't know me. I'm a senior here, and a big part of this trip was vocational discernment, and I'm still not really sure what that means, but I thought about it a lot on the trip to the point where I was overthinking it, and I was like, okay, what am I getting out of this trip? Where am I going with my life? What am I going to do? So when I stopped thinking about that, when we were in Denali, it finally hit me. So we went on a hike with our one guide, Rachel, and it was just amazing, and I can't describe it because you weren't there, most of you, and I'm really sorry you had to miss it, but I hope you'll go next year and see these amazing things, because I can't put it into words, but I am going to read a little something that I took away from that hike and the trip overall. We didn't stay on the trail. There was hardly a trail where we were going. We took our time and made our own path. If we wanted to keep climbing, we did. If we wanted to stop and take in the views, we did. When it felt natural to take a break, we did. When it felt natural to have lunch, we did. There were branches, falling rocks, and other obstacles along the way, but the group encouraged each other to find better footing and keep climbing. The results of our unplanned journey is something I can't even put into words. We saw views that most people will never see in their lifetime. We made our own path. I realized that I don't want to stay on the trail. I'll pursue a career in life that forces me to go off the path. If I want to chase an unusual and challenging goal, I will. If I want to stop and enjoy moments, I will. If I've had enough and get too burnt out, I'll take a break. If I want lunch, please just let me eat my lunch. There will be physical and mental obstacles and people that stand in my way, but I will surround myself with people that encourage each other to push through. I don't know the results of my future. I don't know what I'll see or what I'll do, but I'll make my own path. Thank you.
Good evening. So I am Stephanie Lehman, and I'm the Campus Ministry Fellow here at Westminster. Everybody looks fairly familiar, so I hope you know who I am. I want to start by thanking the Experience Alaska team that went with us this year. I started working at Westminster late last October, and so I experienced Alaska for the first time right along with our students that went. From the bioshelter / permaculture center, which nobody has spoken about because it was not anyone's favorite part of the trip, to the food bank, to the middle of the Denali National Forest. These students were not afraid to really get down and dirty and really experience what we were doing. So when we say that this trip makes you get out of your comfort zone, we are not kidding. I think everybody can vouch that went on the trip that one of the most impactful parts of the trip for me was seeing all of the wilderness. Do you see my face right there? I was so excited. So when asked about Alaska, I generally start off talking about one of our team building meetings that we had last January. I had been asked to do bear training, bear safety training, which, if you know me, I'm a farm girl from here in New Wilmington, so I'm pretty sure you can imagine exactly how that went. Didn't go very well. So as we got closer and closer to leaving for Alaska, I became very anxious that somebody was going to get eaten by a bear, but also super excited about all the wildlife that we were going to see. And so our group me was overtaken with memes and messages that went a little something like this. Hey bear. So on our first night in Alaska, we went moose spotting, which we later found out was completely unnecessary because you see a moose every 10 minutes. That's not even a joke, you see them everywhere. And so this was the first of many animals that we would see over the course of our time in Alaska, and we were so excited. So in the 18 days that we were there, we spotted moose, caribou, snowshoe hares, red squirrels, Arctic ground squirrels, hoary marmots, lynx, musk ox, Dall sheep, mountain goats, a grizzly bear, and a black bear. While in Seward alone, we spotted various sea life, including sea otters, harbor seals, killer whales, northern sea lions, a humpback whale, a gray whale, and a beluga whale. This doesn't even include the birds that we spotted while we were there, which included bald eagles, golden eagles, willow ptarmigans, Arctic terns, and osprey. And these aren't even including the animals and the sea life that we saw at the Wildlife Conservation Center and the Sea Life Center. And so I know I've missed some, Patrick, I can see the look on your face, but I think everybody gets the idea that wildlife was such a huge part of our trip. And the wildlife in Alaska is nothing like you'll see here in Western PA, or really in any of the lower 48. And I think that has to do with how the Alaskans really respect animals and believe that the land belongs to animals just as much as it belongs to us. Or it could also be because moose are like cold-blooded killers, so they're a little afraid of them. Either way. And so on our first day in Alaska, we met this Alaskan native, an Aleut. I'm going to butcher his name, but it's something like Ilarion Merculeaf. We're going to call him Larry because that was what he told us to call him. So sorry, Larry, if you're watching this on YouTube. I tried. And he taught us about how the Aleuts really revere animals, birds, and fish. And they hold rituals to release the souls of the animals that they've hunted. And they continue to believe that by calling out to an animal by its name, you're attracting it to you and calling to its spirit. The Aleuts also believe in using every part of an animal that's hunted, and so they leave nothing to waste. And one of the greatest things that I learned about Alaska was that they really strive to do this, even now. And by using this program that is a roadkill salvage program, which sounds really awful, but what they do is they take moose that have been killed either in a road accident or an accidental hunting accident, and they collect the body and they use the meat from it, which one moose equals about 600 pounds, which equals about 1,200 moose hamburgers. And they feed them to the hungry. So they go to a food shelter or they go to an impoverished family. And so when you're there, the roads are spotless and very impressive, especially when you imagine our roads here in Pennsylvania. And so on our last night in Alaska, I told our students to live every day with the excitement that I displayed when we spotted any animal, bird or fish. It's something that you can really forget in your day-to-day, is to be excited about the small things. We get so overtaken with worry about work, school, and just everyday life. So I encourage you, the next time you see a Westminster squirrel or a deer wandering through campus, or maybe even a cow as you're driving through town, to take a moment and remember to appreciate the wildlife that's around you. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. My name is Anna Daniels, and I am a senior here, so it was really awesome to be able to go on this trip since I knew that it would be not my last chance, but almost my last chance. So I'm going to start off with a quick quote. There are only two ways to live your life. One is though nothing is a miracle. The other is though everything is a miracle. Albert Einstein. Clearly, you can tell that all of us think that this whole trip is one big miracle because it's already 8:07 and we are still talking. But I wanted to talk about the service work that we did at Emmanuel Presbyterian Church. So I definitely had more of a struggle with this trip spiritually than some of the other students. I have never been as connected to my faith as a lot of the people on this trip, and I didn't feel like an outsider, but I definitely felt a little bit disconnected. I didn't see it in the same way, and I think that was difficult for me, and I think people saw that it was difficult for me. But when we went to Emmanuel Presbyterian Church, I jumped right in. I organized a closet because that's what I'm good at. But while I was looking around, I found their mission statement hanging up on a wall, and that's why I brought my phone up here. It's not because I'm rude, I promise. I just wanted to read it to you. We believe that all people are children of God and affirm the worth and dignity of all races, ethnicities, ages, abilities, genders, and sexual orientations. Recognizing that we are an increasingly diverse culture and that there are differences among us, we make a commitment to lovingly accept our diversity, as did Christ, with respect, compassion, understanding, and love. That really spoke to me. I sometimes saw churches as a place of hate, as a place of discrimination, as a place that people were turned away, not a place that people were welcomed. And in this moment, that changed for me. In this specific church, it showed me that it is more than that Christianity is not the few bad people, but all of the good people that come together, that bring us together in love and in caring for other people. And being able to be a part of that meant the world to me. To take my negative experiences with the church that I have had and to bring it all together with all of these awesome people and feel much more connected to God just from this trip was something that I will never forget. And I hope that everyone else who went on the trip feels the same way, and I hope they feel closer to God and closer to their faith, whatever that may be. And I hope that all of you here, if you choose to go on this trip, will have that experience that I had, because it really, really changed me. Thank you.
All right, hi, I'm Lexi Yoho. I'm a senior environmental science major, and I'm going to talk a little bit about climate change and a little bit about vocational discernment. So when most people think of climate change in Alaska, you probably think of a polar bear standing on a tiny little ice sheet. Now, we didn't get as far north to see polar bears, but we did see a black bear on the side of the road that for about 5 minutes I was convinced was a tunnel. It was not, it was a bear, thought it was a tunnel. So I could stand up here and rattle off climate change facts for probably hours and bore you with stuff about permafrost melting, but you can look that up on your own time if you want. It was just so much more eye-opening for me to actually stand in Alaska where you can see the effects of the climate changing. Like Caitlin said, standing where in a valley that 50 years ago had a glacier on it that was a mile thick. And in Denali National Park, on the way there, we saw some effects of wildfires that have torn through the forests there. So I think that was just such an eye-opening experience for me to actually see the effects that we're having on this planet. For vocational discernment, whenever we met Luke from Kenai Fjords National Park and our 2 hiking guides that we had in Denali, they literally they're living the life. I mean, they just get to show people day in and day out the beauty that we have to offer on this planet, and it made me realize that I am on the right track with an environmental science major, and I am pursuing the dream that I want, and hopefully I get to work in a national park or something outside like they're doing. And I'm not saying you have to be an environmental science major to go on this trip, because obviously I think I was the only environmental science major there. And we had so many different majors, and it's just eye-opening for everyone in a different aspect, as you've heard from the stories. So, thanks.
All right, in a minute, I have a reading to do first. Being then God's offspring, we ought not to think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image formed by the art and imagination of man. I have a video that I'm going to show you in a minute, and we were just going to show the video, and I wasn't going to talk about it at all, and I was going to kind of let it speak for itself. But I decided that I needed to say something about it beforehand. In general, some situations it's a good thing, but most situations it's a bad thing. I'm a pretty skeptical person. Like, I'll walk into a massive cathedral that marble walls and floors, mosaics, and I'll say, yeah, that's pretty cool. But the places that I've traveled, I've found that the one thing that blows my mind the most is the natural world around us, especially mountains. There's something about them that's just magical that completely blows my mind. And so there was a quote in every day we were there, we had stickers that Jim would give us to put in our booklet, and being the skeptical person I am, I was like, yeah, sure, stickers, whatever. But there was one that definitely had an impact on me. It was a quote from John Muir. He said, I would rather be in the mountains thinking about God than in church thinking about the mountains. And I think that kind of the entire point of us coming here to talk to you guys about our trip isn't to tell you guys how awesome it was or whatever, but to get everyone who doesn't do things like this kind of out of their comfort zone, as Jim would say, and to just do something, turn off Netflix for a day, and it doesn't matter if you're going out on the bio trail for a walk, just go out and do something. There's always going to be a reason that you can't do it. There's not enough money. Your mom says it's too dangerous. But I found that if you tell your mom about the dangerous things after you get home safely, she doesn't worry as much. So I did my best with this video to show the natural beauty of Alaska instead of the fellowship that we found in Alaska, because there's no way for me to show what we felt while we were there. The only thing that I can do is show a video that I hope will inspire others to get out and experience things for themselves. So yeah, roll the video.
We offer you a beverage service. We have a variety of complimentary drinks as well as alcoholic beverages for purchase. Your complimentary copy of the Hemisphere magazine lists all beverages and pricing.